just, the bass is the song. What's up, guys? Welcome back to Lone University. It is time for some Led Zeppelin here on the channel. We are long overdue, but you guys have requested Ramble On from Led Zeppelin II, their second studio album released in 1969. I'm excited to critically listen to this bass part and enjoy the song. Let's get to it. Led Zeppelin, Ramble On. Cool little texture. Doesn't sound like a drum. What is that? Just a surface? E major? Very major. Pentatonic there. Let's see. Kind of staying around those very just pentatonic notes. I love how up front it is and silky. Just a warm, cozy feeling here. Before it gets going, you know what? You don't hear soft bass on intros like this in modern rock. What modern rock I've listened to, I've always kind of thought bass in this way is kind of it's like a lost art in a way. You know, bass has kind of been relegated to more of like a production component. And what I mean by that is rock nowadays, you know, you'll have a clean intro, maybe a vocal a cappella thing or something. Just, you know, vocal piano, vocal guitar. And the bass is always kind of coming in with the drums, right? It's meant for that production hit, just the wall of sound kind of thing. You want it to come in when that kick drum comes in for the impact. And you don't hear this soft kind of bass just supporting the vocal idea, the melodic idea right out of the gate like this anymore. At least I don't. I'm sure there's bands out there that are still kind of doing this, but that soft bass can be so effective at just warming up the feel of it. You know, if that bass wasn't there, you have this straighter strumming kind of acoustic part from Jimmy Page, right? There's some interesting chords and voice leading in there, some extensions that kind of fill it out, but that bass is just warming it up. I don't know. I don't really hear this today, and that's, again, it might be a lost art. What do you guys think? Let's let it keep going. Such wide panning, too, over here on the left. It's been a long time since I've heard this one. The full thing. Oh, it's cool. That's cool. You know, the Led Zeppelin I am familiar with, it's a good bit of their discography. Not so much the first two albums, not so much the really later ones, but they bridged this like folk music kind of thing and then went straight into like, for their time, hard rock. You know, it's more complicated than just a rock song with a soft intro, right? Like any rock song. They actually went more like folk, at least to me. You know, you think of like Stairway to Heaven, it had the flute, the experimental percussion, maybe some mandolin. I'm not sure all what Jimmy Page used, but it wasn't just a soft rock intro. It was like almost a whole different style. And then when they come in, like they just did, it's like it transports you decades later to a hard rock sound. That was such a big part of their dynamics to me. It wasn't just soft intro, then it kicks in. It was just like a whole sweep to something else. That's kind of what's going on here. And one other thing I want to point out before I let it go on is that this bass part almost foreshadows that feel, that funky feel that comes in when the rock goes on. You know, Jimmy Page is just strumming something kind of straight here. And that bass, to me, it's very up front, right? It's very lead bass. That's very John Paul Jones. But it's almost overly syncopated. You know, it's kind of doing those upbeats, and there's nothing else in the composition there that warrants that until it all comes in and it makes sense, because then he's on that, you know, riding with those funky syncopated kick drum parts. It's a foreshadowing thing. Just really genius to me if that was sort of the intention here, because that's how I'm hearing it. Really cool. And just ahead of its time. See, this is the only thing syncopated here. It's really foreshadowing that feel that's going to come in again. Ooh, that's a weird layer there. See how upbeat it is now? Bum, 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 bum. Dump, dump, It's almost like that bass intro was a slower version of that. Just the foresight of that is really cool. It almost gets your ear used to that. You're already starting to feel it, and then when it comes in, it just kind of hits you a little bit with more familiarity, I'd say. Really cool. Man, just all over the place. I want to hear that part. That little bass run there is really up front. I like how it drives. It helps the drum drive the intensity of that part. This part. A kind of goes to an A there. Before we were kind of sticking around just the major third. And then it sounds like it went up the E major scale again. But this part, that's fast. Dugga, 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 dugga. Really cool. And then again, that same part. That is, again, like a sped up version of that intro. I just like that, how that's kind of binary there. And something else I think about modern rock production, it's about grit. You know, a lot of modern rock songs, the tones, bass tones are really driven nowadays. You don't hear these soft, warm tones quite as much anymore unless you're a band that's really going for that sound, which there are a couple that come to mind that are doing really well today. But it's usually a grit thing, right? Bass is more of that production, just the teeth of the song. And a bass intro like that really wouldn't work in a lot of bands, right? But Zeppelin, it was so just warm and muffled that it was able to come in and not sound like the bass was coming in prematurely. Like, oh, wait, sit out, wait for the drums. That's you're kind of the rhythm section over here. No, back then, John Paul Jones, the bass could be the melody. It really sort of is this entire time. It's so up front. Back to it.
My freedom I hold dear.
It just bleeds right back into this folk thing. I got two layers here on left and right now. Just this like scritchety scratchety sort of strumming. It's just cool how they can just go straight into that. And it sounds very correct. It just sounds like Zeppelin. I don't know, you know, what their influences are. I'm not super well researched on that. I know about the Yardbirds, you know, their blues influence, and perhaps some folk in there. I don't know the true lineage of it, but they do this so well. Just going between those two feels and somehow making them sound like the same band and the same song.
How years ago,
It's a production thing too, right?
magic filled the air. Just in the darkest depths of Mordor.
Love that slide.
So fair. But Gollum at the evil wall crept up and slipped away with her, yeah.
Little funkier here.
I guess I'll keep on rambling.
Now it sounds so natural when they come in.
Yeah, see myself, I gotta find my baby.
Go back and listen to this part. If that bass part wasn't there doing the whatever that pattern is, try to listen to this without that bass part there. I mean, it would sound like a rock song, but it's just crazy how much intensity that little passage adds. You know, he goes from these lyrical sliding notes, whatever that little run is there, and then it's just really in your face here, really eighth note driven. Adds a really strong intensity. I don't know, just a really cool way to add intensity. Normally it'd be like more drums, a double bass nowadays. This is just a bass fill, a long bass fill, bass run. I like the role of bass in that way. How, if used correctly, you can bring so much intensity to the song and not make it heavier. It's just a use of rhythm, where they're placing the notes in between everything else. The context of the drums and the guitar. You know, John Bonham here is not doing anything super busy. It's driven by that bass part. I don't find bands doing that quite today. List me some if there are. I would love to listen. But when I listen back to these older bands, they just had something going on there that I don't know if it was a product of just working with what they had at the time. You know, despite their kind of experimental instrumentation, I think they looked around the room and said, this is what we have. We have us. What can we use with what we have? We don't have the studio tricks like we do today. We have to find ways to be intense and dynamic with the native instruments in our hands. I'm just speculating here. I wasn't alive then, but it's fascinating to just kind of think about the genesis of these ideas. How did they arrive here to add dynamics and intensity in this context? I find it really cool. Yeah, the lead's just kind of going down, go down, go down. It's really that bass part. Ooh, that vocal panning. That was interesting. Very cool. I haven't listened this far in the song in God knows how long. Ooh. Hold on. There's some bass candy here in this fade out. Okay, I thought I was having a stroke or something. The whole song is kind of panning around, just like oscillating left and right. You hear that right here? I haven't heard anyone do this in a while. At first I was like, wait, something come unplugged? Listen to that bass. Woo! You know, this is not the first time I've heard that. It's always the fade out endings where everyone starts just ripping. And I could think of so many more songs that do this. It's fading out and the bass player is just letting loose. And it's like the best, coolest bass parts are like, no, I want to hear what he did there. Led Zeppelin's Immigrant Song was one of the first rock songs I ever tried to learn on bass. It was Immigrant Song and Time by Pink Floyd. You know, I said this a lot in other videos. I grew up listening to a lot of Motown, jazz, and funk. And I was introduced to Zeppelin and Floyd sort of at the same time. Immigrant Song and Time. Time was much easier to play. Immigrant Song was not very easy to play. It was too fast. There's that little chorus thing with it's running up the scales. I've still never quite learned the fingering or what that rhythm is because I put it off for so long. It was very hard. But what it showed me was that John Paul Jones was no slouch. Not only technically, but the parts were really up front. They really led the ensemble. And they added such significance to the melodic aspect of the composition, far past what most bass parts at the time were doing. I would say the Motown songs I was listening to were adding a lot, but they were really rooted in the pocket. And it was almost like, how can I make a bass line that's in the pocket, but I'm going to get away with as much as I can leaving the pocket for little parts. John Paul Jones, when I heard Zeppelin, it was like he just left the pocket. He went and was at the spotlight. adding in these parts, his own melodies. I just never heard anything like it at the time. And I later got on to Rush, Van Halen, and then, down the path of heavier, more modern classic rock and hard rock. But these early Zeppelin albums kind of eluded me. I owned a copy of Led Zeppelin III and IV, and that was it at the time. And from there, my exposure was very limited once I got into other things. Please let me know if you'd like to see something else. I had a lot of fun with this, and John Paul Jones it's a nostalgia thing. It takes me back to when I was first learning bass and hearing these bass lines going, wow, just the bass is the song in a lot of cases, right? Thank you guys so much for watching. I had a great time with this one. Cheers. Make sure you subscribed. I love you all, and we will see you next time.